Thank you, Rebecca. So, the legislature started the middle of January. It was a 60-day session. For those who don't know, we have a 60-day session one year, a 30-day the next year, back to 30, 60, so it alternates year to year. So this is the long session, 60 days. And so Ishwari and I were the team that was dealing with the legislature, and Ishwari actually compiled a list of about 75 people who had said they wanted to be informed and maybe help out. But I'd say the bulk of the work was done by Ishwari, really. So what we're going to do is give you our take on about 12 or 14 bills that we were following. We actually were following 25 bills, but we're going to just focus on about 14 or 15 of them. And they're all about elections and voting and everything. We didn't get involved in anything that wasn't really germane to New Mexicans for Money Out of Politics. So you want to start with a bill?
Sure.
Do you have anything else you wanted to?
Well, I think I'll say this beforehand. I mean, this was a really educational experience for me. I've been at the legislature a few times, but this time I really kind of sunk my teeth in deeper. And I watched a few particular legislators that were, they kept showing up over and over and doing really, really important things. And some of them I was really, really impressed. Others I was kind of like, what is this person doing? And kind of unpredictable and a little hard to follow. So I can share a little bit about that later if there is time, about some of the specifics. But I sure learned about what is required to be a successful legislator, the personality elements. And the sort of, I coined a phrase this morning, and I was like, it's unrelenting civility. And some of them really have it, and some of them kind of don't, But the ones who have it, it's just kind of impressive. I mean, I'm sitting there steaming and seething, and they're like, that's a really good question. So this incredible civility, this incredible intelligence, persistence, patience, energy. I mean, I was really impressed with some individuals. So anyway, I'm going to start in on...
Let me add a little bit to that.
Okay.
I mean, we would go to the legislature, and so there's a bunch of committees, both in the Senate and the House. So a bill gets introduced by a senator or representative, and gets assigned to 2 or 3 committees in each house. So Ishwari and I, and maybe a few of you have also went, and you could sit there for 2 or 3 hours waiting for the bill that we wanted to say 3 words about, and then they never get to it because they run out of time, where they have to go to the floor to deal with something on the House floor or the Senate floor. So it's a pretty frustrating process. It was not, I don't know how many total hours I spent there. They're not huge, maybe 20 or 30 hours, I'm not sure. But I could spend, or Ishwari could, 3 hours in one committee, and then hopefully maybe get to our bill, maybe not. So I don't know if I should even be saying this, because it's not encouraging to get anybody else to do this next time. But we had a difficult time getting people to the legislature. I don't know how many of you actually came and spending time there. But hopefully next time given what we learned this time, we'll be able to do it better next time.
I guess to piggyback on that before I launch into the actual bills, as Bruce said, we were sending out updates every few days. I mean, sometimes it was every couple of days, sometimes it was like 4 or 5 days in between. But when something significant happened, I would send out an update to a list of about 75 people. Occasionally, I would get a note or a thank you or some kind of indication that someone somewhere was reading these and doing something with them. I have to hope and assume that there was a little more activity than what I actually heard about. I think overall our bills did really well this session. I have to think that what we did contributed to that. I have no proof. I can't say for sure. I'm pretty sure we didn't hurt anything. I mean, I think we really can. It's safe to say that it was helpful. But it's kind of a thankless thing. But I just assume that the people that, you know, if nothing else, they are getting a dose of activism. And that, another thing I've learned in this whole political process is the persistence and the, you know, the long game. You just have to like have a little bit of faith that what you're doing is having an impact. You're not going to see the outcome. My latest theory or philosophy is very Buddhist. It's like you work your butt off and let go of the outcome. You know, care, work, and let go of the outcome, because otherwise, you know, I would just have to like stay home. So anyway, with all that cheerfulness, I will just, this is really cheerful. Two things. The first bill that we have one bill that was on the rocket docket. It passed through. It's been signed by the governor. It's like done. And that was lobbyist reporting requirements. A fine-tuned fix, but it was one of the ones that was vetoed last session by Martinez. And so that's like the one that we actually have all the way through the governor. An exciting bill that went through is called
Tell them what was the gist of that bill?
It was just a very, very minute fix on some of the language of how lobbyists have to report. And it wasn't really controversial because it had passed before. Mm-hmm. But, and there are other lobbying bills that were more controversial that we'll talk about. But the one I want to describe is called SB 672. It's the voter registration cluster. It started out as 4 separate bills. It ended up, through all this meandering and, you know, all these kind of stallings and stress, it ended up as an emergency bill. Just before they close the date on legislators introducing new bills, you'll see like all these little bills that pop up that have a name of public peace, health, safety, and welfare. There's like all these little bills that come up with that name, and you're like, what the heck is that? Well, at the end of the session, you find out because somebody grabs that and they put it into a new bill to handle some other bills that aren't faring well. So that's what happened with voter registration. What ended up happening is that we will have, once the governor signs, and she will, automatic voter registration at the DMV unless you opt out. It used to be you could register there if you opted in. But now, unless you say, I don't want to, you will be automatically registered with very reliable data. It's the DMV, right? And then there are some other agencies in the state that also will do that automatically unless you opt out. At the very last minute, this was like a really sort of dramatic process. There were 2 bills. There was the automatic voter registration at the DMV I just described, and then there was same day and early voting and election day registration, because right now they stop registration 28 days before an election. When things are really heating up, you can no longer register. So those were 2 separate bills. At one point, they rolled in this automatic voter registration into this emergency bill, but they didn't have the same day, the election day. I think it stopped like a few days before election day. And then at the very last minute, one of my heroes right now, Damon Eli, amended it back in. So we do, in fact, have election day registration also. You can go down to a polling place on election day, register and vote. So this combination bill was a huge, huge win for the state, and it's going to make a really big impact, I think, in our voter turnout.
No, but that's not going to take effect for a couple years.
The election day piece of it, I should actually read my notes, doesn't take effect until 2021. And the reason for that is because there's the idea that the Secretary of State and the county clerks need time to get the infrastructure in place to actually execute that effectively. So that was...
Is that, on the election day, can you actually register at your polling place?
Yeah.
And vote.
But not
And
until
you have to have a
2021.
photo ID at this point with this bill on that day. Photo IDs aren't, throughout the process, but for that, I think that was probably something they had to sort of, compromise on. But,
Just a question.
I just wondering real quick, that is different from a provisional ballot, right? The provisional
right,
ballot is not going to be counted unless certain conditions are met, whereas this is actually going to be, you register that day,
right,
That's the big difference.
yeah.
One,
Yeah.
one caveat, you cannot change your party
Exactly.
affiliation on
That's,
election day.
so in a primary election, you can't change your party affiliation on the election day. So they are not opening primaries.
Okay, good.
So that's very clear. But yeah, I think that was it on that bill. So that's very exciting.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna go back and forth so you don't get tired of hearing one from one of us. Well, another big victory was the HB 55, the National Popular Vote Compact. For those of you who don't know, the National Popular Vote Compact is an agreement between the states where if enough states have electoral college votes that add up to 270, which is what you need to elect the president, if enough states join the compact that add up to 270 electoral votes, then what will take place is it doesn't matter what your state votes for, whatever the total national popular vote is, that person will win the presidency. So in the last election, Clinton won the national popular vote, and if this compact had been in place, then she would have become president. But because the Electoral College, this is a way of getting around the Electoral College without having a constitutional amendment. And it passed both the House, 41-27, and the Senate, 25-16, and the governor's expected to sign it. Now, we only have 5 electoral votes, New Mexico. It's based on 2 senators and 3 representatives. Colorado also just passed it. So now there are 186 votes in the compact towards the 270 needed. And there's a number of other states that are also, now there's 12 or 13 states who have joined the compact. And a number of other states are working on this. And if enough of them join it through their legislatures to add up to the 270, then in the 2020 election, the Electoral College will become moot. And whoever wins the national popular vote will be the president. And one of the main reasons,
Delaware also just went.
and passed it. But they have 3 votes? I mean,
Still.
81 more votes will be needed after this.
what's that?
Only 81 more votes will be needed.
Oh, so Delaware, yeah, because the Delaware only has 3.
Yeah.
Now, one of the main reasons for this is the system we have now. Really, the only states that really get attention are what's called the battleground states, where it's not clear, it's so close that, like California, everybody knows that's going to go Democrat. Texas, everybody knows that's going to go Republican. So the candidates do not spend much, if any, time focusing on those states. They only focus on battleground states like Ohio and Florida, where it's uncertain who's going to win. With this new process, if this compact comes into effect, that will every vote, no matter where it is, will count the same, and therefore the candidates will have more incentive to come to New Mexico or to California, wherever, to try to get more votes from those states. Yes.
May I just add one thing in here? The most telling point for me about the battleground states, is that presidential candidates, their parties no longer run popular opinion polls in non-battleground states. So they don't even care what we want, you know.
And it'll also increase the probability of a higher voter turnout in New Mexico and other states as well, where people, I mean, if you live in California, you know that California's going to go blue, why bother voting, you know? But if your vote in California is going to count the same as a vote in Florida, then every single vote will count the same. So it will change the incentive to vote. Would somebody else?
Oh, I was just saying, does this mean that candidates are gonna have to campaign in all 50 states? So, if it does, in a way, I can sort of see it backfiring. It's like, that costs more money. I gotta campaign everywhere now. I'm gonna have to go to big donors now and get more money because I need it to get around all 50 states. Is that the side of this?
Well, possibly. There's a possibility, but at the same time, you can have Well, there's also, there's a pretty big movement towards small donations, like Sanders and Beto have been showing. So there are other counter things that may not have that effect. Somebody else said?
Well, one other benefit of the national popular vote is that right now, the states that are the battleground states, after the election, they get more roads money, they get more money for everything because they're constantly being courted for the next election. So it's not only during the election and during the campaign season, the states that don't count don't get a lot of the monies and things that they should get because they're not politically important, right? All year long, all 4 years long. So it's really an important move. And we really hope that the 270s is reached. I don't know that it'll be reached for the 2020, but it could very well for the next one.
And there's also a possibility that even if it is, it'll be challenged in court as unconstitutional, and it may be stayed until the court gets to hear it. Rebecca?
Okay.
And at this point, we're more than 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah.
In terms of the
Yeah.
number of votes that are needed.
But these compacts, I mean, there's interstate compacts around trade and a lot of different things, so it's unusual in that it's being done for elections, but compacts are constitutional. You want to go to the next one?
Sure. The next one I'll do is Senate Bill 3. This is a bill that Senator Worth was carrying for literally years, almost a decade. Last session, it was approved, like so many, and vetoed by Martinez. So it came back around, a few small tweaks, and it actually went through. So that's a real success. Senate Bill 3, campaign finance reporting. And what that does is, I don't even want to go into the details because there's a lot of details on all these bills, but it cleans up the finance reporting. It's in the area of dark money, and so it cleans up some of our election code and campaign finance regulations, and it passed, and so that will actually become law finally. Senate Bill 4 kind of goes along with that. It was another one that Senator Worth has been carrying for many years. Same process. It got vetoed last year, and it is public campaign finance changes. So it cleaned up and made some important minor changes to the public campaign financing, which, so there's campaign financing in general, and then there's the people who opt to go with public campaign financing. So it's all the same words, but it's a really different category. So both of those went. Senate Bill 4 on campaign public finance was almost unanimous, which is really impressive. Senate Bill 3, campaign finance reporting, had some bipartisan support, but it wasn't quite as much of a sweep. But in either case, they will be signed by the governor this time around, and that's a real success, I think, and a real testimony to the long game. I mean, Peter Worth has this incredible ability to just keep going and bring them back and bring them back, and they finally made it to the finish line. So those are exciting too.
Okay, HB 57 was the felony voting. Right now, anybody who's been a felon and in prison cannot vote until they finish their parole or their probation. And this bill was to make it so that once you got out of jail or out of prison, before you, as soon as that happened, whether you had probation or parole after that, you could register to vote. However, it's right now it's still on the docket for the House today, and it hasn't even gone to the Senate. And there are 90 bills, believe it or not, that are still on the docket for today, and they have an hour and 16 minutes left. So it's highly unlikely that this bill will go anywhere since there's so little time. And it's a very controversial bill in terms of allowing people who have committed felonies to vote. So we supported it, but it's it looks like it's not going to pass.
So a hard story is the HJR 4. That's the Article 5 convention approach to a 28th Amendment to federally regulate campaign finance. It's one of the biggest issues in terms of getting big money out of politics in the country. It's often called Issue 1, because until you do that, it basically deals with the problems of Citizens United. And until we do that, everything else that gets worked on is just sort of, could get crushed by whoever has the most money and can buy their candidates or their legislatures. So the Article 5 convention approach is one approach, and the other approach is just straight out at getting Congress to write and pass an amendment. The Article 5 convention has, over the years, developed a lot of opposition from groups that are otherwise very sympathetic to most of our causes. And it's kind of puzzling and kind of infuriating. But Sheila there is very involved in an organization called Wolfpack, and that's their thrust, is to get a 28th Amendment via or using the Article 5 convention approach. I don't want to go into the details of the convention, other than to say that pushing towards a convention, I believe that the consensus is that the main value of that is it pressures Congress to act. If Congress sees this convention coming, the possibility of the states having a convention to form an amendment, they see that getting close enough, they'll say, okay, we want to be in charge of the amendment, and they'll actually do one. So it's more of a pressure tactic, but even still, it has kind of inexplicable opposition. It was after, I don't know, probably a good month, it was finally scheduled in its first committee. Had an extraordinary amount of people there, several days in a row. We had to go back because of what Bruce said about bills not actually getting heard. And it was squashed pretty brutally right after just incredible testimony in favor of the bill. It was just like, boom. It was a heartbreak. It was a real rough moment, and that was our first real kill, I think.
And just to add to that, it was a 5-0 vote against it, and it just shows the power of lobbying. I mean, clearly these committee members have been lobbied heavily against this bill, and none of them really, even what we would say the most liberal people on the committee, had no real interest in the bill. So it just shows how powerful lobbying can affect a bill that should have gotten a better treatment, not necessarily passed, but at least better treatment than it received.
And I have, pardon?
Who are the main lobbying forces?
The
Well,
ones
Common
that
Cause was a
lobby
big lobbyist in
against
this,
Women's League of Women's Voters and Common Cause.
No, they were all against
That's,
it.
inexplicably, some of our allies in every other area are dead set against this particular thing. And so New Mexicans for Money Out of Politics, I think courageously has stood up and said, we support this. A lot of other organizations are led or informed by, take the lead from Common Cause and the League of Women Voters on this issue, and we really did some research and said, no, we don't agree with that. We're in the minority, and this is just who we are and how we do. Before I finish, I just want to, a shout out to Marianne Sundquist and Gurujo Khalsa and some others in terms of just like I said, the extraordinary efforts and a little bit of wound licking going on right now, but an incredible determination to keep moving forward and to learn from this process and not lay the issue down. So there's an incredible amount of stamina, and I really applaud you guys in the Wolfpack effort. There's some Wolfpack handouts on the table if you're interested in that particular group.
We need to go faster.
Yeah, okay.
We'll never get through this. Okay, the next is House Bill 93 and Senate Bill 418. This was about the primary election being opened up so that if you weren't a member of Democratic Party, if you decline to state what party you are for, then you can still vote in the primary. So it would open, I mean, some open primaries are, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you can vote whichever primary you decide. But in New Mexico, if you are a member of the Democratic Party, you can only vote in the Democratic primary, or Republican only in the Republican primary. So this bill was an attempt to open up the primary to those people who didn't declare whether they're Republican or Democrat. And it failed. And then there was a substitute, which is the Senate bill, which said that the parties, if the parties want to, and we, the people, the voters and the taxpayers, pay for the primaries, not the parties. But so this substitute bill, 418, said, okay, if you want to keep your primary closed, then you pay for it, you the party. And that didn't fly either, because the parties don't have the money to pay for primaries. They wouldn't go along with that. So in the end, neither of these bills really got anywhere. And one of our allies, New Mexicans for Open Primaries, Bob Pearls and his group, was very adamant and strong in supporting this, the HB 93. That was their bill. And it wasn't the first time. They've been doing this at least the last few years. And they were quite disappointed that they weren't able to muster any support for it. But, you know, the parties control the primaries, and they don't want other people who, you know, independents or people who might come in and take some control away from them. So that's why I think the parties were so strongly against it.
I'd like to just add sort of one of the seamy sides of politics stories to that the second bill Bruce mentioned, the one that said, okay, if you want to keep your primaries closed, you're going to have to pay for it. That was introduced by a Republican, a very interesting senator named Mark Moores from the Bernalillo area. He's an intriguing guy, and verdict is out. I keep being intrigued by him, and he votes against everything all the time. But I'm really intrigued, and we've had interesting conversations. Anyway, he sponsored that second bill, and it seemed almost to me like a setup, because in the hearings, what happened is a Democrat basically sided with Moores, hijacked the bill, amended out the whole piece about the parties paying for the elections. Just amended that out. That was the whole point of that. That was the only reason why that bill made any sense. So the bill, even though it didn't pass, the final version of it was basically nothing. It said, oh, the parties can open their primaries if they want to. And if they don't, the state will pay for it anyway. It was like, whoa. And that was one of our guys who did that. So it's a very interesting process. And this is that particular person is one of the people I'm kind of watching. Super smart senator and not exactly predictable. So that was just, I think, really intriguing. Pardon?
Is it our guys?
Should I?
I mean our.
Oh, I can't say, because he's supportive of everything else.
Yeah,
He is a very, you never know, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
He did that. And I've seen him do other things like that.
Just another guy pointed out, he amends everything. He can't let Bill go past it. A lot of times it's just grammar.
Oh, yeah,
You
like a
know?
comma. Well, they have to, it's law. That can make the difference. It's important, but yeah, no, he is very interesting, super smart, generally great in terms of our issues, and once in a while it's like, what? What did you just do? So it's an interesting thing. The next one I want to talk about is House Joint Resolution 6. Allow for runoff elections. It's on the Senate floor as of this morning, which means if it gets passed on the Senate floor, it's passed. But it was still on the floor. It's got, I don't know where it is at this moment. It made it through the House, and it was on the Senate. The resolution proposes to amend the state constitution to allow runoff elections in every election other than municipal. The resolution is to be submitted for approval by the people of the state in the next general election. So if it passes, it'll be on the ballot. The notion of allowing for runoff elections except for municipal elections. And I think that's because the municipalities already have the say as to what they want to do, I think.
So does this bill, the resolution stipulate under what circumstances those runoff elections would be taking place, or just states that they can happen?
A runoff election between the two candidates who receive the highest number of votes ensures that the winner has the support of the majority of the voters. Ranked choice voting, sometimes called an instant runoff, requires voters to rank their choices in order of preference. The amendment does not specify the type of runoff election that it is proposing, so it is likely that the ranked choice could be an option that the state could pursue in implementing runoff elections in the state. In either case, no candidate with support from less than a majority of the voters could be elected. So again, this is to be put out to the people. If the people vote yes, then it would come back to, I think, the legislature to be actually implemented, and that's when the details, similarly to how the Ethics Commission was voted in by the people this last election and now just got ironed out, which you might want to talk about now.
Okay, well, the next one I have here is the HB 169 Public Corruption Act.
Oh, okay.
And that is, so if a public official is found to be convicted of some kind of public corruption, bribery, or something like that, then besides the normal sentence that they would receive, or penalty they would receive for that crime, it would provide an additional deterrent by that they would have to forfeit their service credits accrued pursuant to the Public Employees Retirement Act during all periods of service as a public official. In other words, if you are a public official and you were getting 15 years pension credit, you would lose that credit, on top of the fact that you may get 3 years in jail or something for the bribery. And that passed the House 65-0. And this applies to all public officials. I think at all levels, I believe. So it's a good bill, and but it hasn't passed the Senate. Now, whether they're going to try to push it through this morning or not, who knows? But with a 65-0 vote in the House, you would think the Senate would try to cover it today. But who knows? We'll see. Go ahead.
So, the other bills that I have are bills that aren't going to make it. And one was an interesting one, HB 131, post-session lobbying reports. It would require lobbyists to report which bills they worked on and whether they were in support or in opposition or something else, which often can mean they helped, work out different things. That was unanimously passed on the House floor and tabled by the Senate Rules Committee, which I think if you just think about that, 1/2 of the legislature unanimously passes it and boom, it gets stopped in committee. Another thing I have learned in this process is just how powerful the committee chairs are. I really didn't know that, but they are incredibly powerful. And this is a perfect case. So that is not going to happen. However, I've also learned that because it's a long game, making it through one house is a really big success for the next time around. And so that's not nothing. Anytime a bill makes it through even a committee, they get to carry that into the next time it comes around, and that's a plus.
Okay, so the State Ethics Commission, last November, we, the voters, passed there was only like 6 or 7 states in the country that don't have a State Ethics Commission, and we were one of them. And we, the voters, passed this bill or constitutional amendment last November, but it had to be filled in. I mean, you know, it doesn't have the details of who would be on the commission and what powers they would have, et cetera. So there were two bills. First of all, there was HB 4 from the House, which we thought was a good bill, and we supported it. And then the Senate came up with their version, 619, Senate Bill 619, and the people who were sponsoring HB 4 didn't think that it was strong enough. HB 4 was a strong bill in that it had a lot of transparency to it in terms of making everything public about the complaints against whoever, you know, the ethics complaint was, and having subpoena power so that you could have a good hearing and whatnot. And the Senate bill, apparently the sponsors of HB 4 didn't think that was strong enough. It didn't have enough transparency and so forth. So then both of those bills got squashed or whatever and stalled. And Senator Mimi Stewart came up with a third version, SB 668. And that just happened in the last few days. Really haven't had a chance to look and read it to see how strong it was. But it passed the Senate 40-0, and it passed the House 66-0. So it will be the law of the land, or the law of New Mexico. And the reason that it passed so strongly, I believe, is because we have this constitutional amendment that says we have to have a commission. So they had to do something to make sure there was something to go forward with in terms of who would be commissioners, or not people, but how the commissioners would be selected, and whether there would be subpoena power or transparency and so forth.
What was that final bill number again?
SB 668. So you can go to nmledge.com and look up any of these bills. I don't know if they'll be in their final form yet, but and get all the details. But my sense is Mimi Stewart is a strong senator, and she probably, I would assume, given, and there were a lot of amendments apparently also that to the final bill, but it covers compliance with the Campaign Reporting Act, the Voter Action Act, the Lobbyist Regulation Act, Governmental Conduct Act, and other ethic laws. So I assume, hopefully, it's a pretty strong bill that covered a lot of what we thought was important. Yes.
Did it include funding? That was a big issue.
They have it earmarked somewhere else,
Did you?
$500,000. I just read, it passed at about midnight. And the sticking points were they did get subpoena power, which was a big sticking point from HB 4. But yeah, there's $500,000 marked for it.
Okay. Go ahead. I still have 2 or 3 more.
While she's looking, can you explain to me exactly how a couple of these things we're supporting, which I'm totally in support of, fit into the money out of politics rubric? Because it's just increased voting in the primaries and for felons and auto registration. Is that all in support of we want as many voters out there as possible and to counter the influence of money? Or I'm just not quite clear exactly.
Well, if you look at our goals,
It's one of our goals as an organization.
And
That's not, okay,
It's right there, number 6.
Number 6, yeah.
yeah.
the question is still valid, even though it's one of the goals, how,
Yeah.
but I think you kind of explained it in your question. That the more voters we have, the less effect
Maybe.
money will.
Unless they're all bought.
Right.
well, there are 2 things that have power: money and people. You know, and so we're trying to counter the money with more people and more
As
transparency.
long as they're not paying for their votes, which has always been a problem too, right?
Well, okay, go. Come on, we need to finish this up. We're gonna have this for over half an hour now.
Well, there was a Native American voting task force that was proposed, and it had unanimous support in its first committee, and it was tabled with no discussion, nothing in the second committee. Kind of crazy. It was going to be a study on Native American voting to enfranchise that particular element of our population. and it had great support at the first committee, and it was, tabled. I went down to Derek Lenty's office immediately after that, because I thought, well, he must have said, take it off for some reason, because they didn't even consider it. They tabled it with a few other things that they tabled at that particular committee. Everything was appropriations. They were like, we're tabling this, and it just never showed up again. But his secretary or his staff had no idea, and I did not ever get back to him. So I don't know what happened with that, but it's just another one of those interesting situations. I mean, so much follow-up could be done on these bills to see what actually happened, who were the players, exactly, what was going on. It's a very complex process, and I think to really advocate for or learn about or follow any one bill is a lot. There's a lot to it. So, to take on 20 bills, we kind of, we couldn't do a fully thorough job.
We could have
It's just a
used
lot of
another 10 people working on this with us.
Yeah.
That's why you're so amazing, you're not getting paid for any of this.
Okay, then
Yeah.
next is HB 462. And Ishwari mentioned the public financing bill. This bill was to add the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to the public financing, so that those two, right now it's just judges and
PRC.
the PRC, thank you, that are have some public campaign financing. And this would add the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. And we thought this was a very good thing. The more public financing, the better. But the House is just voting on it today. There are 90 bills that I saw were still on the floor for today, and it hasn't gone to the Senate. So unless there's some kind of mechanism that they could vote on it real quick and then get it over to the Senate and the Senate vote on it, it's not going to go anywhere. You have other ones? I got two more.
In some ways, is that maybe a good thing so that we can work to support it, for the next time?
Yeah, we could have maybe worked harder to support it this time too. You have something else?
So along that lines, in terms of working to support it better next time, it's my understanding the 30-day session is quite different than the 60-day session, right? So a lot of these bills probably won't be available to be even
Yeah, the
considered.
30-day session is supposed to just be what the governor puts on the call.
And finance.
Well, it's always financing, yeah. But and what the governor, and along those lines, interesting you brought that up. There was in one committee that I was sitting in, there was a suggestion, a memorial, which is just, it's not a bill, to have all the sessions 42 days, not have a 30-day and a 60-day, so that it's hard for some of these people to spend 60 days who are in business or, have a job, to take 60 days off. But if there was 42, it would be, a little shorter. And then I suggested to the co-chair or the assistant chair at the end of the hearing that why don't they make them all 60 days, but split sessions, 30 days, and then you go back to your job for a month or two, and then you come back for a second 30 days. He liked the idea, but I don't know if it'll go anywhere. You have anything else?
Yeah. Well, there was another bill, HB 140, which was employer estimated lobbyist reports, where employers would have to, the people paying the lobbyists would have to submit reports. Common Cause declared that one dead in the water, and in fact it was. It never even was heard in its first committee. But I thought that was interesting. The other lobbying bill made it a lot farther, but also didn't, get all the way through.
And then there was SB 416, which is a redistricting act, and I think that is something that's ongoing, but it didn't go anywhere as far as I know. Still in Senate committee, to have this legislative council service have appropriations and the ability to come up with a redistricting plan, which would then go to the legislature. But as far as I know, it really didn't go anywhere. And one more was the SB 449, which was public disclosure of income tax returns by presidential and vice presidential candidates, which would be very nice if we, and of course that's in response to President Trump being the first president not to release his taxes. But as far as I know, that didn't go anywhere either. Anything else?
I guess Where, are we over time?
Yeah.
Let's just take a couple of questions and then be done. I could,
A lot of people have been asking questions throughout.
okay, well, I could keep going. I guess if we have another couple of minutes, I'd like to just mention a few people who I think really are sort of allies and well, I want to say good guys, but I was really impressed by certain legislators. One was Damon Eli. His personality is I mean, he tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter. You know where he's coming from. He's not afraid to challenge people.
And he was the main supporter of sponsor of HB4, the Ethics Commission.
Yeah, I think he's largely responsible for some of the really good stuff that ended up in ethics, and he's hugely responsible for a lot of the voter registration success.
He's also hugely responsible for the death of free and fair elections resolution.
Was he impacting it? Yeah.
Totally, absolutely, yes.
Is he? Yeah.
With that, won't even have a discussion with us.
So with the exception of that, I haven't seen anything else that he was not good on. But he's the one who's got the unrelenting civility and incredible determination. And I just think I was very impressed with him. Matthew McQueen, I think, is also very principled, very sharp, and I was impressed with him, and he's very supportive of all of our issues.
Not
Steinborn.
open primaries,
Pardon?
not open primaries.
Not
Yeah.
open primaries. Okay, so nobody's perfect. But Jeff Steinborn from Las Cruces also, I think, it was voting in support of all of our bills, very easy to talk to. He came up to us and, explained what was going on with certain bills, very approachable. So I have some bad guys here. I'm not going to mention them by name. But if you want to talk to me later, I'll tell you what my experience was with certain, not bad guys, certain things that I was really surprised at. And there are other people who were very supportive of our bills too, but I don't want to take the time to mention them all.
Okay, one other thing that just occurred to me. In the ethics bill, I think this was originally John House's idea, but I presented it. There's a statute of limitations is once it runs, then you can't bring a complaint because you only have a certain amount of time. And in the original bill, the statute of limitations to bring a ethics complaint was 2 years from the time of the incident, the bribery or whatever it was. Well, people who violate ethics usually do it under the table. They don't do it out in the open. So, I'm doing it here. I'm going to. We brought this up. He said, that's ridiculous. If you don't have a statute of limitations that from the time that it's discovered, then there's no point in it. So they did amend the bill to include 2 years, either from the time of the incident or 2 years from the time that it becomes reasonably likely to have become known, which I still thought was too vague, but at least that allows a broader interpretation of when you can bring a complaint. And that was something that we were largely responsible for. Any other questions or comments?
I'm curious, I mean, for me, being, relatively new to this particular type of activism, this has really been a big learning process for me. And I know both of you have, much longer histories with it, but are there any sort of lessons learned, like maybe things that we could do differently next time, more effectively next time?
Well, certainly get more people involved. I mean, we had 75 people on this list that Ishwari developed, but how many people were actively involved? You Retake Our Democracy had a statewide network of people, and were much, I thought, better organized than we were, and had many more people involved. So that's certainly one thing that we could work on. And working, if we target certain things, certain bills or certain ideas, you really starting at the beginning of the legislature is not the time you should be starting. Should be starting a year before the legislature. Like right now, we should be starting, if we pinpoint 4 or 5 things that we want to see happen for next year, finding out the committee chairs who are going to be dealing with them, and working, trying to educate and lobby them so that they're more likely that we'll get their support.
Also getting on interim committee agendas.
Yeah.
I want to ask about that. Is that useful? How useful is that?
Well, I think it's very useful in educating legislators. actually do presentations.
Yeah.
Interim committees. But I don't know how you get on the interim committees.
Yeah.
Well, I believe you're open to the public.
Well, they are, but they already have by the time they're open to the public, they have an agenda set up. So you have to get on their agendas.
That would be a really, really smart path to explore in terms of leading into the next session, how to do the ahead of time work so that you're not just kind of like hit with 1,500 bills.
Well, I think a major way to educate is to become the expert on a bill who then is the lead along with the sponsor of the bill in any committee.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They actually need that. They
Yeah.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
They really like that.
But you really got to know what you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
and, be thorough
Yeah.
and trusted by the bill sponsor.
And we had this conference last April, and out of that, I can't exactly connect the dots, but Bob Pearls, who was one of our speakers at that conference, ended up creating this coalition or group that met a couple times last fall with the League and Common Cause and
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, Open Primaries, and a few other people, and I was at these meetings, that looked at what bills do we all, or not just bills, but ideas, are we all on the same page with, and how can we work together? So working with that group and other groups like that to try to formulate and push certain ideas and certain bills throughout the year is a way of making or helping to, when we get to the legislature, to have a coalition working on whatever public financing or whatever it is.
We should wrap it. We should be done.
Yeah.
So just one to the last meeting, so I'll wrap it up for you. But my understanding was because of the change in governors, there were twice as many bills as usual for a 60-day session. So a lot of so we should be very fortunate and glad that we got as many things as we did done. And a lot of those chairs are probably saying, I got this huge list, what am I gonna prioritize and bring up and hear now or not? I mean, some of it may be the effect of lobbying, and some of it may just be, we can't deal with all this right now, and we'll just have to put it off and see what comes up. So I think you guys did a great job, and I really appreciate all your efforts. And
Thank you.
Thank you.